Hi guys, I've got something really special for you tonight. It's an antique book signed in person by Robert Ross, who, as you may know, was Oscar Wilde's best friend, first lover, and literary executor. This book is really special to me. I've always loved Robert Ross' friendship with Wilde. I've always thought that, if Wilde was able to fall in love with Robert Ross instead of Lord Alfred Douglas, he would have been so much happier than he ended up to be. Of course, you can't control love, but well, you know what I mean. Robert Ross was truly in love with Wilde and he supported him even after death. And he was a very brave person, but I'll get back to this later. So, this is a series of short stories that he wrote. He was mainly a critic and an art dealer, but he sometimes wrote stuff like an introduction to Wilde's Salome and this collection of stories. With the book came two ad memoriam, and this one is from an article written in 1919. And it mentions that Oscar Wilde thought Robert Ross was the wittiest man he had ever known. And I mean, if Oscar Wilde said that, it must have been said with reason, given Oscar Wilde himself was incredibly witty. And this is another ad memoriam article. So this is the book. It's very interesting to notice that dedicating the book to his friend, he told him that he was going to highlight with red mark the stories that he found were the best ones, so that in case his work was worthless, friend could read just the highlighted stories. I think that's a testimony of his being an humble man. So here are the contents. With the book came a signed letter by Robert Ross. He is organizing a meeting with a friend of his. And it's signed, "Always your Robert Ross." I'd like to tell you why I am interested in Robert Ross. My father is a great fan of Oscar Wilde, and he got me into reading Oscar Wilde since I was a child, basically. I absolutely loved it. And starting to read more about Oscar Wilde, about his life, about his friends, I kinda stumbled on Robert Ross, and I started to realize Robert Ross was not an ordinary man himself. What really caught my attention was the loyalty he showed to Wilde even after his death, and also the sense of dignity that somehow guided him his whole life. For example, Robert Ross made no secret of the fact he was homosexual in a time where this could be even dangerous. And there is an episode that happened when he was at King's College, Cambridge. Basically, he was thrown in a fountain by some other students with the approval of his own professor, and that happened because he was homosexual. And he tried to obtain the dismissal of the professor, but the university stood behind the professor against him, and he dropped out college, and he came out as an homosexual to his own family. I mean, he was just basically a teenager, and I think it took a lot of bravery. Also, I found very interesting that after Oscar Wilde's death, Robert Ross became his literary executor. So he tracked down and purchased the rights to all of Wilde's texts, because basically they had been sold after Wilde's financial collapse, and he gifted them to Wilde's children. Ross also gave Oscar Wilde's children all the money earned from the publication or performance of Wilde's works while he was an executor. He had a warm relationship with Wilde's children all his life, and he also tried to fight against the trade in black market copies of Wilde's books, especially the erotic ones that Wilde never wrote. He was the one who produced the definitive edition of Wilde's work. And he also had to fight a lot against Lord Alfred Douglas, who had a very vindicative attitude and tried to damage Robert Ross in every possible way. He tried to have him arrested twice, and he was responsible for Robert Ross losing his job. Even if he had no obligation, Robert Ross is the one who commissioned the sculpture that we can see on Wilde's tomb in Paris, in the Père Lachaise cemetery. And in 1950, I think, Robert Ross' own ashes were placed in Wilde's tomb, which is kinda romantic, even if in a very sad way. So Robert Ross has not been a great writer, has not been a genius, but he was a remarkable man, great critic, and his work as a critic, especially when he was a critic of Wilde's works, is absolutely important. And this is the reason why I feel quite privileged to be able to own a book signed in person by him. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Honestly, I have no idea whether you might be interested in these kind of books or not. See you in the next video. Bye bye!